Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so thrilled to have my guest today, Jessica Erlendson. Welcome, Jessica.
Oh, hi, Dr. Lulu. It's great to see you today.
Yay. Well, you're tuning in from Canada today, right?
Yes, I'm in Calgary, Alberta, so I'm on the other side of the Rocky Mountains,
Oh, beautiful. I haven't been there. That's where Banff is. Is that where Banff is?
very close to Banff. Yeah, exactly.
Nice, wonderful. Well, I love the Rockies, but I haven't been to that part of Canada yet. I'm gonna put it, it's on my list.
Oh, you got to come. I want to go to the other side and see, on the Montana side myself, because I haven't
Oh,
gone
yeah.
that far yet.
Nice, wonderful. Well, today is a special day in the United States. We're celebrating Thanksgiving. So I'm so grateful to have you here and to share this amazing topic today that we're going to be discussing perimenopause and really how women can understand what it's like to not be alone, right? To know that they're not the only ones.
Yeah, that's kind of the most powerful message, I think, is that usually, if you're talking menopause, we think when we're having, skipping periods, then we might think, oh, this might be menopause. But all this weird stuff that happens in perimenopause, maybe your periods are normal. That was what happened with me.
Mm,
I was still having regular periods, but I started having anxiety and sleep problems and other issues in my body that were perimenopause, but going through it alone,
mhm.
you feel kind of crazy. And then you go to the doctor and they run the standard tests, they're looking for disease and they don't find anything.
Right. You're normal. Go
You're
home.
normal. And you go home and cry because
Mm,
you don't feel normal at all. And then I think there's a lot of shame around talking about menstruation still.
yeah.
And even with the girls, maybe they don't really want to admit that it could be perimenopause because that means you have to look at getting older.
Right. A lot of different aspects.
A lot of different aspects. And for maybe moms starting in their later years might be thinking, well, I was hoping for one more,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, and maybe I'm out of time. So there's perhaps a loss there. And then one of my friends who's going to be working with me producing my podcast really nailed it down as like, all the stuff that you're talking about loops back into mental health. And that's the real issue
Mm-hmm.
is that we're feeling alone and
Right.
lost and afraid because things are different. And,
Right. Out of control.
especially, yeah, especially with the abnormal periods that can go like really scary heavy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I didn't have that, but some of the stories that I hear all the time from the support group that I'm running on Facebook where women are just like, you know, it's just murder periods, like way, way more blood. And even if they were regularly having a heavy period, they're like, this is like ridiculously, I can't get off the couch
Mm.
kind of thing.
Yeah,
And how
I
are you
hear
supposed
that
to have your
too.
quality of life, right? Where's the
Right.
quality of life for that woman?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yes. Those things I appreciate that you're bringing all those topics to our table today because they're super important and we're going to discuss those more in detail. But we jumped ahead. I want to hear about you first. Let's jump backwards a little bit. Tell us about you, Jessica, who you are, what makes you tick, and what's your passion in life?
Well, I mean, you'd have to say I'm an entrepreneur. I've always been very stubborn. It's not that I don't take direction well, but I have a problem with authority, which means I question everything. And there's the good side of that and the bad side of that. It means that I work alone a lot. I work on my own. I run my own businesses. I work with kids a lot and I teach music lessons and I work with
Mm,
songwriters, helping them develop their craft. And then through this whole journey of going through perimenopause myself and all of the study that I've done in holistic health, I started to see that there's this gigantic just gap of women being told that they're normal, but they're going through these symptoms. And I started helping people through this Facebook group, just kind of as a lark, maybe like I had a little extra time during the day and I might as well just get on there and see if anybody wants to talk about it because I want to talk about it. I want to talk about
right.
everything. And sure enough, there were ladies that I did not know personally, but they wanted into the group and wanted to talk. And it just sparked this whole passionate side of helping women. Because if you look back at all of the stuff that I've done, when I was teaching music lessons exclusively, it was always with this idea of self improvement and how you can have a high quality of life
Mm-hmm.
and accept and embrace yourself. And then this attitude of helping women and children. And when you help a woman, you help the whole family.
Right, exactly.
And that's really what I'm kind of gearing now towards thinking, I want to be the voice that particularly Canadian women, I'm finding there aren't a lot of Canadian perspectives. And American and Canadian is pretty similar as far as what's available in lifestyle goes,
Right.
but it's not the same. What I can get easily is not what you can get easily, because our rules are a little bit different with the
Right.
drugstores and the pharmacies and the natural products and everything. And I want to be the voice where that woman who wakes up in the middle of the night going, what's wrong with me? Who am I? This isn't my body. I don't know what's going on. I want her to be able to find my website, my sport group, my podcast,
Right.
and know like right away, because that's on every page on the website is you are not alone
Mm,
right away, because that's the most painful, I think, going through this and feeling like you're the only one.
right.
It's the worst.
Yeah,
And it's not true.
totally. Right. Yeah. And it's not right. Yes. But yeah, you feel like you're isolated. I think that, yeah. And I think that's kind of the point there. And thank you for sharing your story with us or your background, what kind of inspires you, because it's really important for us to get to know you a little bit to hear kind of like how you tick, but also your passions in helping others. So Tarika, I could really hear that in how you describe what you do and how you feel about helping others. And yes, as my mission in life is to help women as well. And so that's one of the reasons why I have my podcast, to help women be empowered to learn about their health, right? To know they have the answers, to know they have choice in their answers, to know that there are alternative choices, not necessarily in the traditional model that they're being fed a lot of lies, so to speak, about their health. So it's very empowering to have you here. And I'd love for us to dive deep into talking more about perimenopause today. So we talked a little bit about what inspired you, and tell us so the name of the group the Facebook group is the CPMS. And what does that stand for?
Canadian Perimenopause Menopause Support.
Yay, I love that. And that's on Facebook. So women can find that and check it out. Is that where the main group is?
Yeah, we have a thriving group on Facebook of almost 6,000 members.
Wow, it's
And
great.
yeah, and I'm running it a little bit differently than I think a lot of groups where they're sales oriented or they're, just kind of doing it as a hobby. I have extensive experience running support groups. I worked as a volunteer for Al-Anon for many years running
Mm-hmm.
groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't exactly put in the same guidelines and rules, but for me, it's always like, is this comment supportive? So we've done a lot of like filtering out stuff, and like I will send people messages and just say, hey, do you think that comment you made was supportive?
Mm-hmm.
And just ask them, because what I'm finding is a lot of the time women don't really know
Mm,
what supportive is. It doesn't mean you
right.
agree with everybody. It doesn't mean you agree with everything,
Right.
but one of the things that I argue for is if a woman is sure that she needs to take medication, let's support her and get her that medication. And if a woman is sure that she does not want to take medication, let's support her and make sure that she doesn't have to
Right.
take medication and give her
Mm-hmm.
all of her options. And then there's someone like me who does both. Let's support them in doing
Mm-hmm.
both. It doesn't mean that we have to all agree. And so we've developed over time this culture of support. So the people that are most active and comment on all of the posts or almost all of the posts, they come at it from that angle. We don't have to agree,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't talk about other topics, right? It's not like, if you wanted to talk about your son growing up, you're welcome to talk about that, because that is something that we're all likely going through. But
Right.
if you want to talk about a political debate, we
Leave
don't
that.
want to, yeah,
Yeah, leave that
you can do
behind.
that elsewhere.
Yes.
It's not don't talk about it. It's not that it's not important. It's just, is it relevant to what you're living through with the perimenopause? It might be aggravating your perimenopause, in all honesty, if you're really stressed out about the political
Right.
climate.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Anger can be a component of perimenopause and menopause. And I really like that you said that component, Jessica, of having to be very specific and supportive, because I think that's the big component that women are lacking. And also that, you mentioned the different phases that people, or women specifically, can be in regards to their own support, whether that's through having a pharmaceutical or having an herbal component or hormone support, that we've grown up through the feminist movement, that women should have a choice, right? And so
Exactly.
their choice should be honored by all women. So I love that you brought that into the conversation today too.
Yeah. And I've had to a few times be like, because someone will post immediately like, whatever, something about big pharma. And I'll just confront them on that, right? Like, this is a support group. So is that supportive? And how could you frame that in a way that is supportive, right? Like,
Mm,
what would be supportive there would be maybe pointing them in a direction of a podcast that had information about that particular pharmaceutical or that
mm-hmm,
company. You know what I mean? Like,
mm-hmm.
let's share information more than bashing people for their
Right.
lifestyle
Yes,
choices.
that doesn't help people feel like they're in a community when they're being bashed for their opinions, right?
Exactly. And there is no
Yes.
one right way. I don't know if you've found that, but
Mm,
from what I'm seeing with the ladies that I'm helping with the coaching, I can't have like, this is what we do, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, because everybody's a little bit different.
mm-hmm. Yes, holistic health is very individualized. I think when I work with patients, of course, I have the specifics I'm looking for with maybe like red flags or things. There's generals that women have in regards to hormones, but then they're very individualized when it comes to other things about their bodies, right? How different things are functioning, different aspects, especially like how the thyroid and the adrenal system. I mean, there's so many different pieces that make us individualized as women and as humans. So, yes, I think that's the cookie cutter method that's failing our system, especially for women, right? We're like, well, this doesn't fit me. None of those things help. And you mentioned earlier going in and saying nothing is wrong, right? That's a cookie cutter method that where you're really realizing like that method does not serve us.
No, and I think it leaves people behind too, right? I have one lady right now who's done all of the HRT that has been recommended for her, and she had really high hopes because she's extremely smart and she learned a lot about women's health,
Mm.
and she's a bit of a researcher. She has a science background. So
Nice.
she knew her stuff before she went for it, and it's not working.
Oh, shoot.
So, there you go, right? And that's where you can't have this, it's a miracle and it's going to work the same for everyone kind of
Mhm.
attitude. So she's going to have to look into more of the alternatives to see, and honestly, I think sometimes the people that are doing the best are the people that are doing both. They're doing the natural side of things, like they're looking at their
Mhm.
exercise, they're making sure that they're doing some kind of stress reducer every day. They're watching their diet, maybe they've cut out sugars and alcohol and caffeine, which are our culprits for worsening
Triggers.
symptoms,
Mhm.
and they are getting better results on HRT than the women that are just hoping that the prescriptions are going to do it for them. And I always tell them, in the long run, you're in the best shape because you're taking care of everything on this holistic side of things. You're
Right.
probably going to have not only long life, but long, healthy life, as opposed to medications that will just keep you alive and sick.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You have to have that balance between all the phases of the body. And the lifestyle component is, I think, even more important than all the other pieces, nutrition and lifestyle, because that's really what supports our body moving forward. It helps us to make positive choices. It helps our brain function. I mean, there's so many different pieces. And yes, I think that when we're only having one piece of the equation, if we're talking about bioidentical hormone therapy, if we're only doing that, and we're not addressing any other piece of our life, our body is not going to move forward at the same rate or space or speed as when we have the holistic health entered into the equation, right? Because our body is a holistic model. We can't just do one piece of the physical aspect and expect it to be, like you said, like a miracle, like everything's gonna woo,
Yeah,
right? And I think
everything
that's
goes back to normal.
yes, I think that's the old paradigm that's also been was being blown up too, because we were taught for a long time, unfortunately, like take this pill and everything gets better, the magic pill, right? And our bodies are much more complicated than one pill.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that everything's kind of changing too. So that's what I'm finding a lot,
Mhm.
where the ladies need like more frequent check-ins than what they're getting.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
recommendations are a little bit, there's too much room in between seeing their practitioners. Even 3 months is a little
Mhm.
bit too long because they
Mhm.
need some kind of attention in the meantime.
Right.
And Canadians, I don't know if this works with the US the same, but we are very compliant.
Mm.
In general, if our doctor says come back in 3 months, we will wait for the 3 months to go back. Like, I'm constantly telling women, no, if you have a new thing,
Right, you know, you can go back.
go back. You go back
Right.
and you tell them, or if you're really uncomfortable because something they started you on is not working for you, you don't wait the 3 months. You go in and
No, right.
yeah,
Yeah, figure it out. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, and listening to your bodies, becoming aware of what's working and what's not working, and then being proactive in your health
yes.
is so key. And let's back up a little bit too and talk about kind of just like what perimenopause means. We talked a little bit about it, but it's a phase I think we understand that not really a lot of women understand fully, right? Because it's this in between land, the gray area. And I'd love you to explain kind of what it is and why we're really even coming today to really talk about it. What makes it so essential for the women listening in?
Yeah, and that's, I think, the term perimenopause means everything that happens before menopause. And menopause is when your period stops and has not happened for a year. And then everything after that is postmenopause. So we're on this, spectrum.
Mm,
And then women will enter that spectrum at different points. And
hmm.
then as they enter the spectrum of perimenopause, they have to adjust, which is very frustrating. And it just occurred to me, it's that that murky kind of nowhere's land, that
Hmm.
that kind of will lead you into that, they call it the dark night of the soul, where you start asking those questions. Why
Hmm.
am I here? What is this about? What is my
Hmm.
purpose? If my child is grown, or if I'm not going to have any more children, what does the rest of my life look like? And for a lot of women, if they're having disruptive symptoms and they're maybe only in their late 30s, that's very disheartening because they feel
Hmm.
like their life is over.
Right. Yeah. And that's definitely a time to check in with your healthcare practitioner, figure out what's going on and why you might have stopped having your cycles early. What's is there a different root cause to the problem? Yeah, that's definitely, and perimenopause can run from a wide range, like you were just mentioning, in age group. But if it happens, in my patients, if I see it happen before kind of like the certain time with other things going on, I really want to dive deeper. Like, okay, what's going on here? Maybe it's your egg quality, maybe it's stress, when there's so many components why our cycles can stop, right? So if it's an abrupt, especially if it's abrupt, a lot of times
Yeah.
we'll see, right, that change in bleeding slowly happening over time. But if it's like when you have your great cycles and boom, nothing, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem quote unquote normal.
Yeah, like something has gone wrong.
Hmm.
And what I hear a lot from the ladies that I work with in Canada is our doctors have a tendency to not tell them they're in perimenopause.
Mm.
They just say, "Oh, you're having irregular periods. We know that the IUD with the progesterone really helps with that. I
Mm.
recommend trying an IUD." And it's a double bang for your buck because it's excellent birth control. It works like almost perfectly. And so they decide to go for it and they get the IUD, but there's no diagnosis. So that was the first kind of like hurdle that I saw with people
Mm.
that I was talking to, is they would say, "Well, my doctor didn't say perimenopause, so I don't have perimenopause."
Right.
It's a little bit different though, right? And now
Hmm.
what's happening is women are kind of going, "What the heck? My blood work came back normal, but I'm not sleeping. I don't feel well. My periods are all over the place, or really, really heavy, or not at all." And
Hmm.
they start doing some research on themselves online, looking things up, and they quickly can say, "I could be in perimenopause." And a lot of those people are the people that join the group because they're like, "I think maybe this might be what's going on.
Hmm.
What do I do now?"
Right.
And
What's the
that's where
next
that
step?
symptoms list comes in, because
Right.
they can look through the list and go, "Oh, shoot. Ooh, and me. Ooh, I do. And I have that too. Oh, geez.
Right. Check, check,
Really?
check,
That's,
check.
yeah.
Right. Yes. And I think that the piece I really like about your support group too is that then you can relate to other people that are experiencing the same thing, like that you're not alone piece. And that's a piece where women I often see in my patients, they don't, maybe they can talk to their mom or their sister, or their aunt or something, but they don't always feel comfortable with that component. And then also they might not be in the same aspect of their reproductive health, the same phase, right? And so finding other women that are in that same phase is relatable, right? Allows them to feel on the same page and also feel totally supported in some things that might be going they don't understand.
Yeah. And we have that all the time where someone will be like, "I have this, 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 and this. Anybody else?" And almost right away, two or three other people will be like, "That's me," or
Right.
"That's me, except for I have this as well." you
Right.
know?
Plus this bonus.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they immediately, they'll send me a message after they've looked at the list and maybe done a post in the group and say, wow, thank you for creating this container where we can go and talk about this really weird, embarrassing, you know, kind of horrifying stuff for some of the women. The
Mm,
stories are just the kind of condition that the doctors are leaving the women in. They would never do that with a man, leave him like literally wearing a diaper and bleeding through it in a parking lot.
mm,
Do you know
awful.
what I mean?
Right.
That
Yeah.
I just can't imagine that a doctor would be like, that's okay. We don't need to
Right.
treat you right away for that. Like, we'll
Right.
just, but that is what I'm hearing. And so when that person posts, as much as it's like, oh, geez, someone else has gone through that,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll go, you know what, you're not alone. And this is what I tried. And I ended up doing this. And this really helped. And you could try that. And now all of a sudden, this woman, instead of feeling like, oh my God, I could die in this parking lot and no one would care,
Mm-hmm.
right away, there's people not only caring, but giving like solid life experience. Here's something that you could do advice.
Mm-hmm. Which is so important. Yeah, that's what's really, it's like the old healer community, right? Like we're passing down the medicine in that way, or our specific tricks and tools to really help each other as women, which have kind of got lost as the as the telephone game evolved over time. And I'd love for us to talk to Jessica about some of the common kind of misconceptions or myths about perimenopause that you've encountered and see in your own experience.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is in the medical community that there's this attitude of, well, it's a natural process. Every woman who's lucky enough to live into their 50s is going to go through some kind of menopausal journey. It does happen, but it's pretty rare that you just kind of, and then my period stopped and life was wonderful, although it
Mm-hmm.
can happen. And then that just leaves women with this idea where, okay, the answer to what now is suffer
Mm-hmm.
alone
Mm-hmm.
and keep doing all of the jobs and keep doing all the responsibilities. And it's not good enough. It's that answer is just not good enough. There
No,
is a
that's a
lot you
horrible
can do.
answer. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But the doctors here, a lot of them will be like, okay, we can do some antidepressants for the anxiety, which is not a bad call. You could
Mm,
do that. I did that. And it actually, when I did it, I thought, you know what? This is a brilliant, like, help hand up for me.
mm-hmm.
And with my doctor, when we talked about it, the objection often is, I don't want to be stuck on this for the rest of my life. And she said, no, when you're using it for the transition in perimenopause to menopause, what
Mm-hmm.
happens almost always is when you get to the other side of things and things have adjusted, you don't need it anymore and you can just
Right.
go off of it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's just a tool in your toolbox, but that there's so much stigma around using medication and so much, what would you call it? It's not really misinformation, but it's like the doctors don't take that time to say, okay, I realize you're not depressed, because they're usually not depressed. You're usually
Mm-hmm.
having anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But here's why the antidepressant works for anxiety. It works with your brain chemicals and it increases the receptors. So you just get more feel good hormones going into the right place. And that will help you be less anxious.
Right.
Oh, okay. So you can explain that really quite simply in simple language very quickly, but they don't. They just go, here's an antidepressant, take it or don't.
Right.
Next.
Right. Next. Yes. Yeah. And that's definitely not helpful. I think that's the empowerment piece we've been talking about, Jessica, is not only bringing the awareness to the table about perimenopause, but when we're talking about pharmaceuticals, there is a piece, and I'm on the fence that I like to see patients use pharmaceuticals in an emergent situation when it's really needed. Otherwise, I like to support my patients in a more natural way because that's what I'm trained in no work, but I'm also trained in pharmaceuticals. So I know what they are, know how they work, how I can explain them to patients, what the interactions are, what the contraindications. And that's the piece that I'm trying to get to the point here. If that's missing in the typical allopathic field, right? Is they're not trained in the same way that we are as naturopathic physicians. So I can see all the components like, okay, if you're on an antidepressant, what are the pieces maybe you're going to be depleted in these specific minerals? Let's help support your body until you're able to make the transition off of this medication. Right. And so there's tons of pieces of the puzzle instead of, like you said, just handing it out and like, see you later. Like that doesn't help. You might have side effects that worsen. Your symptoms of depression might worsen. You might have suicidal symptoms. There's so many pieces of that specific conversation that we're not follow through. Right. And so I think, yeah, definitely a message there. I think that I appreciate you bringing forward is to check why
Yeah,
you're
check.
taking something and ask questions to your doctor.
Yeah, and
Be
I'm
empowered.
super lucky. I have a functional medicine doctor. I have my family doctor, so she does my pap smear and my ear infections and my
Hmm.
whatever skin bump checks.
Right.
And then I have my functional medicine doctor who looks at my hormones, and they both look at all of my blood work and they both look at everything that I'm taking. And so
Hmm.
anytime I add a supplement in, I check with the functional medicine doctor because she's more trained holistically to
Hmm.
look at that. So she can look at it and say, okay, this one maybe isn't the best choice for you because it has this ingredient. Like she always wants to know what's in that.
Right.
And as I've gone through this process, I've gone less and less towards blends, and I'm more taking like right now I'm using holy basil as an adaptogen.
Love that one.
And it's so mild, but it's really, really helpful. And like it's a heart tonic and a digestive tonic, and it's good for the heart palpitations that I started having at night. And now
Mm.
they're gone. But when I was trying blends of different things, they didn't work for me.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
you know, and that's part of like having someone you can talk to holistically and not just going one way or the other can really bring you together into a beautiful package where you're really, you know, held in that kindness. But
Mm.
you need a holistic practitioner who can look at all of that stuff. And
Hmm.
that's part of what I do with coaching with women because I'm the only one. I'm interested in your relationships. I want to know about your job. I'm curious about what's happening for you, you know, with your sleep and your eating and your weight, and not even just weight, but more body composition. You know, what are you
Right.
doing for workouts? What are you doing for stress relief? What kind of impact is this having on your relationships? How are you with boundaries? Do you know what a boundary is?
Right. Let's define boundaries. Step number one.
Yeah, and because I just did a session yesterday, I did an intake with a new client, and she said, you know, she's talking about, and this is not unusual either, going through divorce.
Mm.
And then a lot of the time for us, it's really looking around and going, you know what? He's not participating in the family really.
Mm.
He's providing money,
Hmm.
but I'm doing all the work, so I might as well just do that on my own because it's a lot easier to just have one captain,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
they divorce, which is not I'm a big fan of divorce actually. If you need out,
If
get
you need
out.
out, get out. Right. Don't
Get
don't
out.
let you don't ride through the suffering.
No,
Yeah.
don't just put up with it because one thing I've learned about men, the more you put up with it, the more they dish out, and that's
Mm.
human nature. That's not even a criticism of their personality or that particular individual. We all do that. If we can get away with it, we try to get away with more. But so talking to her, and then the big issue, she was talking about anger, and this comes up a lot with, you know, just the rage. I've never had rage before, but I do now sometimes. And it's usually about a boundary. When I look at it to see like what is really going on, I
Hmm.
haven't set a proper boundary to protect my own self and my interest. And so my advice to her was to use that anger instead of like, okay, this has nowhere to go because I can't really be mad at him. He's just doing his thing. He's always been that way. That's the way
Hmm.
he is. However, what I was like, what you can do is use that anger as fuel to get your maintenance. Because in Canada, we have this maintenance enforcement program for your child support,
Mm.
which means the government takes on that file,
Hmm.
and they have like, it's a chart. He makes this much money, you make this much money, which means he should be paying this much money in child support. And then they go get it. They
Nice.
go get
Good
the child
job.
support
Right.
and they put it in your bank account so
Wow,
that
that's
you don't
amazing.
have
We
to
need that
talk to
here,
him.
I think.
Yeah, I think that it's been life changing for many women and children that weren't getting proper care. And
Hmm.
you know, I said every time you're really angry about that situation, just make a phone call, you know, and do whatever the steps you have to take to get that worked out. And then you
Right.
don't even have to think about it. The money will just start to come because you can't fight with them.
Mm.
They're not interested in his excuses. If he's working, he should be paying, and he should be paying this much because that's what it says on the chart. Is that super fair to everybody? You know, arguably, perhaps not because he also has expenses, but she needs to take care of that child and
Hmm.
herself, especially in menopause and with perimenopause. You know, you might have your impact with the work. You can't maybe work as much or in the same
Mm.
way, you know?
Right. Yeah. As you're going
So,
through the changes. Yeah. And having different aspects of brain function start to come into play. Like I see
That's
a
so
lot.
nice.
Yes.
Such a nice way of saying that.
Different changes in brain function. Yes. Brain fog. And that can have a lot to do with the hormones, right? As we see with different aspects of estrogen and cortisol, the thyroid component, all those can change our brain function in the way that we're not used to. A big component of promoting brain activity for women
Yes.
of all ages, which
Yes.
is super
Yeah.
important.
And that's one of the things that I address also in my coaching and in the group. I'm talking about lion's mane an awful lot, which is a
Mm-hmm.
mushroom. And myself personally, I always I'm an avid learner. I'm almost always in a course of some kind, doing some kind of upgrading or learning, because that's sort of, I guess, part of my passionate entrepreneurial spirit. I want to
Mm-hmm.
better myself and I want to be a better practitioner and help more people. And so I was in a psychology class and it was learning psychology. And I've got this history of teaching music lessons for the last
Mm-hmm.
over 20 years. So I thought, oh, I'll be really interested in this, right? But I started having trouble doing my reading. And
Mm.
I wasn't enjoying the material. That was because the behaviorist stuff, some of it's pretty dark. Some of the
Oh
experiments they
yeah.
did on autistic kids,
Oh
it's pretty
gosh.
bad. And I'm very sensitive. So when I read something like that, I put myself in that position. And
Mm.
so I was saddened. And I was
Yeah.
also a little bit horrified that I have a minor in anthropology. And when I did that, every time they talked about a study that they had done that was ethically questionable, they always announced that first.
Yeah.
This is ethically, we would never do this
But we
at this
did.
point, but this is what we did, and this is what we learned, and this is
Mm.
why it's important.
Right.
So that then you could go, okay, I can understand. It sort of gave you this detachment from it, like whereas in the psychology class there was none of that. It was just, here's a horrible thing we did, and we called it a success
Right.
because it worked.
Mm-hmm.
It changed the behavior of that person. And I was like, I'm gonna have to ask for an extension. I can't get through this material. Maybe I even have to drop out. Like my
Oh
brain
no.
doesn't work anymore. I
Yeah.
don't
What's
know what's
happening?
going on. I love reading. I don't know what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. And I was complaining to my husband, and he said, why don't you try that lion's mane? Because I had tried it previously,
Mm-hmm.
and it was all right. I didn't find it to be particularly great because I guess I didn't need it.
Mm, right.
But I started taking it with breakfast and lunch, just a quarter teaspoon, and I got through that class and I got a B.
Nice way to go.
So, it
Excuse me.
works.
Yes, yeah, lion's mane is a great medicinal mushroom. It's been studied a lot for cognition, and it's very helpful for women who and men who are suffering from some kind of memory lapse, right? It really helps us,
Yeah.
but focus is a huge piece of it too. So helps with memory, but also helps with focus. And I think that's the kind of, the piece where we're always looking for those things together to come together, and there's a happy marriage. How can I focus and then remember what I was doing and then
Yeah.
focus on it again?
Yeah. And the only warning I give people is because it is a mushroom, sometimes you could have stomach upset. In that case, you can't take it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to when you're first trying it, like with anything, just sort of check in and see how your body's feeling as you go through the day. And if you notice any indigestion, stop taking it, see if it goes away, start again, see if it comes
Mm-hmm.
back. And then, because there was a couple of mushrooms that I was really excited about taking just in general for I have a inflammation condition. I have a chronic pericarditis that comes up when
Mm.
I'm exposed to a virus. Lucky me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's bad. But the ones that I tried, I couldn't take because of the stomach upset. So
Mm.
that's just part, but for some reason, lion's mane is fine. So that's why you can't say one thing, I can't do
Mm.
supplements because sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can, and you only
Mhm.
find out by trying.
That's true. And there's lots of different forms as well, right? So they could be in a powder form. It could be, and you were talking about combinations that can be combined with other things that help with digestion better. It can be in a liquid form, can be in a liposomal form. I mean, there's so many different forms that are different. We're seeing so many even more on the market. Gummies,
Yeah.
all these different ways that our body can then digest something. But yeah, I love that you brought that up, Jessica, about it's very individualized. Make sure you're checking if it's okay for yourself with your practitioner and then trying it out. And if it doesn't work, talk to your practitioner or stop taking it. Say, hey, this isn't working. Don't keep taking it.
Yeah.
I
And I
always tell
often
my
say
patients.
try a different brand or like you said, if
Exactly.
you've been
Mm-hmm.
taking pills, maybe try a tincture. I know that
Mm-hmm.
there's some of those available. You know what I mean? There are
Yeah.
different ways of taking it that could potentially work really well, but you don't know till you try.
Yeah, and mushrooms specifically, and we're like on a side topic, but mushrooms are grown on lots of different aspects, and so sometimes they'll be contaminated with different things that can upset the digestive system. So whenever I'm prescribing mushrooms specifically, I always want to make sure I know the source, who's growing it, where is it coming from, and that way that can sometimes be a place where some people can have a specific reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. So when we're talking about menopause, we've got off our lovely topic. I love talking about herbs. I could talk about herbs, mushrooms all day. So we're talking about perimenopause and menopause. What are some holistic approaches or practices that you recommend to women that you've seen through your own personal experience and through the group to help manage symptoms? Let's first, I kind of like talk about, you kind of sugar-coated some of the symptoms, I think. Let's break down first. Let's talk about some of the symptoms and then what we can do to help with those symptoms.
Well, okay, the first one that I
Top
hear,
five.
yeah, the top 5 is
Yeah.
anxiety.
Anxiety.
Sudden and increased anxiety for no reason. Everything's
Mm-hmm.
fine. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're terribly anxious,
Mm.
but the cat's right there and everything's in its place, and you kind of walk around and do your whatever. All the doors are locked, there's nothing out of place, and you've got a plan for dinner tomorrow. There's no reason to be anxious, but you're just feeling horrid.
Yeah.
And anxiety is one of those ones that's very tricky, especially if you've never had it before.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I feel like I was lucky because I've had a kind of chronic low grade anxiety. It's never interfered with my ability to function.
Mm-hmm.
Done a lot of performing. I've put out albums. I've gone back to school. I did study abroad, you know, but you have to look at what you're doing with your energy. So one of the things that I found really helpful is going for walks.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this nervous energy,
Yep.
or even with rage, like if the rage comes on, because that's another thing that women will say, I've never had rage before.
Right. The
And then what do
testosterone
you
rage.
what do you do with that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do? Well, don't just try and sit through it, right? Don't try and ignore it, and
Right.
don't
Like,
hope it goes away.
yeah, no. Work through it. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So if you don't like exercise, because a lot of women, I think a lot of our exercise experience has been sort of like self-torture. I
Mm.
got to do another 20 minutes on the treadmill.
Right. Run eight
That's not
miles,
fun.
come back home.
That's not enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
But going for a walk, and I would call them a rage walk or an anxiety walk, where I would really be pumping my arms
Right.
and just
Working through
going
it.
as
Mm-hmm.
fast as I could to
Mm-hmm.
just burn off some of that energy, because you've got this excess energy. That's basically what anxiety and rage is, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. So when you burn it off, or weight
Mm-hmm.
training was excellent for that. I love doing the sandbag slams, because you pick
Mm.
it up over your head and then you just, like, as hard as you can, thwack it on the ground, and it gets a satisfying thwack. And when I was at the gym working out, I work out at home now, but I would have the girls like look over because I enthusiastically,
Like, what's she
enthusiastically,
doing over there?
yeah, it was, you could hear it, because I'm trained in music. I'm a musician. So I was going for that sound. I wanted that satisfying,
Right.
whack. And then there's talking about it, you know, finding someone to talk to about the
Yeah.
anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A
There's
therapist or
cognitive behavior
counselor.
therapy. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
cognitive behavior therapy. I've done a lot of that. It's very helpful. And then there's stress reducing practice. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
I would bring in yoga. And I
Mm-hmm.
do it in a very sneaky way, where instead of trying to get you to do an hour, I pick simple things that you can do in like 5 minutes. So
Mm-hmm.
here's
Little
something you can
mini
do for five
sessions.
minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here's something you can do. And what happens is, over time, you develop a little bit more awareness of what's happening in the body, a little bit more responsiveness about what you need, and you'll start making decisions based on what your body needs you to do right now,
Mm-hmm.
instead of, like, there was just walking away from dinner, like turning everything off and being like, I'm out the door, and my husband going, where are you going? I'm going on a rage walk. Okay.
Okay, have fun out there, sweetie.
Yeah, I'll see you when you get back, because he knows from watching me, and he's very observant. Like, he's one of those people who is probably a behaviorist, right? He watches behavior from other people, and I always came back a little bit happier, because the other thing I would do is call a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and even if I didn't get them on the phone, I would leave a message, and I would say, I was cooking dinner and I got really angry, or I got really, really frightened about something. I was really anxious. So I went for a little walk, and I wanted to reach out because I was thinking of you. and I love you and I'm here
Mm.
for you. And, call me back if you want or don't, like,
Right.
but then I felt like I had made that connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people in the group are doing, right? When they
Hmm.
say, I hate to admit this, but I'm having rage. And then
Right.
like, here's 6 people right away say, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So reaching out and being active, just moving your body. Your body's made to move. It's not made to sit still.
Right, exactly. I love that you brought that component of movement in, Jessica. So important. We're talking about the fight or flight method,
Yeah.
right? So parasympathetic and sympathetic, when we're in that moment, right, of anxiety or rage, anger, that's the sympathetic nervous system, like, oh my gosh, like, that adrenaline surge and cortisol surge. So when we have that movement in the body, it really allows us to then move back into the resting and digesting phase, right? Into the parasympathetic. So not necessarily like running from the bear, but
Unless you love
moving the
yeah, if
energy,
you
right?
love running, I say that a
Exactly.
lot,
Yeah, I love running, and so it's
yeah,
helpful for
I'm,
me.
there's sometimes where, the general advice for us with exercise is, do it, but dial it back, right? Not so
Mhm.
aggressive and not so much cardio. But I always say, except if you love it. Like if
Right.
you love getting on that bike and just giving it, then
Right.
do that,
Then
right?
do
Because
it.
you're going
Right.
to make yourself feel so much better. Don't
Hmm.
hold yourself back from an activity that you love. But if you've been running on the treadmill every day for 30, 40 minutes before you have breakfast in the morning and then feeling like crap all day,
That's not
we
good.
need to, yeah, let's
You need
switch that up.
protein.
Yeah, let's switch it. And
Yeah.
yes, please eat some protein.
Yeah. Eat some
That's the other thing.
protein.
For
Right.
mood in general, or like that's the next complaint I get a lot is
Hmm.
my weight is just out of this world. I can't control my weight.
Right.
Nothing's working. And that's been an experiment for me as well, right? Because I'm going through it too.
Hmm.
And changing with adding in more protein, being a lot more aware of, instead of looking at calories, looking more at the macros, which is,
Right.
how much protein and carbs and fat am I getting?
Hmm.
And switching the emphasis from cutting out fat to adding in healthy fats.
Healthy fats. We need them. They're
Yeah.
hormone backbones. You got to have them.
Yeah. And did it I did this change over the summer. I started playing with my diet and I did it kind of with, taking a grain of salt sort of thing, like
Hmm.
the power of food. I am aware of that and I have experimented and had some success, but I wasn't really sure if this would make a difference or impact my symptoms,
Hmm.
particularly that anxiety, insomnia, rage, weight gain. Those ones are really sticky and hard
Right.
to budge, right, in general. But yep, it did.
Nice. And what was the change that you did?
I increased my protein.
Just the
So
protein.
every time
Nice.
I eat, I increase my fiber. So I'm having a little bit of flax
Huge.
every morning. Yeah,
Yeah.
increasing
Fiber is
healthy
really
fiber.
important. Hmm.
I reduced my sugar. So I'm not, as much as possible, I'm not having added sugar. So all
Right.
the natural sugars still, like fruits and vegetables and everything that you might find, I'm not cutting out any of that good, healthy whole foods, but cookies, cakes, ketchup, salad
Catch
dressing,
up.
they have sugar in them. Like,
Right. Yes, you do. Reading the labels is really key.
yeah,
And I love that you brought up the fiber component because a lot of women don't realize that estrogen is released. One of the ways it's released is through our bowel movements, right? So if we're not getting enough fiber, we'll have that buildup of excess estrogen in the system. And through perimenopause and menopause, we have the changes in estrogen. Most of the time it lowers, but it can build up in the system if we're having a lot of constipation, which is very common for women.
very, yeah,
Hmm.
very common. And it seems like a lot. So my biggest form of advice when women are listening to this, don't do everything at once, hon. Don't. Like,
Right. Overwhelmed. No.
no, you pick a thing. So say you haven't been exercising or you realize that you need to make a change in how you're exercising. Just do
Hmm.
that. Just do that until you have a good habit of changed up. You'll go, oh, you know what? I switched to swimming and now I'm so happy. So then
Right.
you're good, right? You're good with it. You're going to continue.
Yes.
Then maybe let's look and see what's in this, my favorite dessert, or whatever it is, the thing that I have every day that I maybe am suspicious is not helping me.
Suspicious.
I'm not sure. I haven't actually read the label, but then you read the label and then you also give yourself that grace and that time to decide if you want to let that go. And then maybe you just don't buy it next time.
Right. Yeah, giving yourself the space for trying something new is super important. Yes. And I have found too that some patients are either, there's all different types of individuals, right? So if you're the jump all in type of person, then maybe you need to make more changes at once. If you're the person that's a little slower, maybe it's like the rabbit and the hare, right? You're slower on the piece and adding in one thing at a time. And I love that you brought that in, Jessica, because that's the way that then we have a component of a habit stick. I think it's what is it, 90 days it takes to make a habit stick, so to speak. So if we're trying 8,000 habits at once to change, it can be chaotic, overwhelming. And then what do we know what works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, it's kind of weird because I'm this cute little, white girl in Canada, but um, I got into weight training because I had this pericarditis that wouldn't go away. And my naturopath said, you have to join the gym. And I was like, I'm going to immediately hurt myself. And she said, no, you're going to get a trainer. And then you're going to be compliant and obedient as you naturally are. That's your nature. You just do what she says. Go to the lady gym so you don't have a bunch of dudes staring
Lady
at you
Jim.
because that makes you uncomfortable. And so I just did what she said because she knows, and I didn't at that point know anything about. And the medical establishment had failed me because they kept me alive on anti-inflammatories that
Oh.
work,
Mm-hmm.
but they made me sick as well.
Yeah.
So I started experimenting with weight training because that was the advice. And I don't love weight training, but I love what it does with my body. I love how I feel when I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I started my husband also started working out with weights and working with a trainer himself. And, he wanted the Arnold Schwarzenegger. He did this bodybuilding book that's just like, if you want to know about the human body and you like Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's extremely valuable. And he wrote one for women as well.
Wow.
And
I'll have to check that out.
yeah, one of his philosophies is add one thing and then watch and see for a number of weeks, like 4 to 6 weeks, and see.
Right.
Because, like, say you're listening to this today and you're thinking, okay, she mentions mushrooms, so I'm going to take all the mushrooms, and she mentioned gummies, so I'm going to find everything I can in gummies. And you know what I mean?
Right.
And then something's working, but you don't know what of that cocktail is actually helping you because you've added 7 things all at once.
Right.
So if you take it one thing at a time, then you can say for sure this one is working. So I'm going to keep this and then I'll add something else, which I think has really been very helpful for me because I am one of those people that was like, let's do it all at
Right.
once.
Do it all. That's how I am too. Don't want every single supplement all at once. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that's probably not the best idea. I
Yeah.
talk to my
And
patients
then,
about that too. One thing,
yeah,
and even if say you have a list of 5 or 7 things, adding them one at a time, right? So you can see, like, okay, try this for a week, then add the other one in, and then you can see how your body responds and also how they interplay together. Because sometimes you can have a different reaction when you add in, and we don't know. I'll have a patient report back like, oh, I'm having headaches from a supplement. I'm like, well, which one?
exactly.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Right. So you have to stop everything and then put them all back in. So yeah, awareness of what you're taking. I think that's the point I'm trying to make here is know what you're
Yeah.
taking, know how your body feels when you take it, and know if you want to continue taking it.
Well, and that's where that checklist comes in too, right? So
Yeah.
I had someone contact me last night. She wants to work on, and I'm not going to call it weight loss. I'm going to call it body composition. So
Right.
we're
Yeah.
going to work on body composition. And so I said, print off the list of symptoms and fill it in now. That gives you a baseline.
Right.
And then when we add something in, you can do it again in a few weeks, depending on how you feel, right? And then and you should see the check marks will go from the right side to the left side.
Exactly.
That's how you know, right? That it's kind of like a report card where now you want less numbers instead.
Right. Yes. We don't want more, we want less. Yeah, that's a great way. And having that qualitative and quantitative aspect for us to measure, right? It's like we're in our own personal study because
Yeah.
that's what we are as humans. We know what works best with our body. And when we have something, journaling is the best. I find that patients love it as a way for them to keep track and keep them engaged, as a way for them to learn about themselves. Like, oh, I ate that. I don't know. I ate that donut. Not that I'm encouraging you to eat donuts, but I ate that donut and look what happened. I had a surge of energy. I crashed. I felt horrible. My face broke out, all the things that you might not realize because of something you did unless you were tracking it.
Yeah. So that becomes a very important skill. And also, I think it keeps you out of your head, right? Because you can be
Exactly.
saying to yourself, oh, it's not, especially if you're talking about body composition. Oh, it's not working. The scale hasn't budged, right?
Right. The scale must be
That's
broken.
why my question was, are you okay with going by how your pants feel?
Right.
and how you feel in your body, because it's not, I don't think that, weight is important. It's important to know where you're at. A healthy body will pick a weight and just want to stay there.
Right.
So it's okay to work within that time. If you see that, if you notice that no matter what you do, like for me, it's 160 pounds. No matter what I do, I
You're
always
like,
end
this
up
is the
back around
magic number.
160 pounds. I might be able to get it down a little bit, but it goes right back up. I might go up a little bit, but it goes right back down. And I'm not going to fight to get to that artificial doctor imposed, body mass index of
Mhm.
155, which is what I should be on the chart because I'm 5'5" ish. And she said, yeah, I'm okay with that, which is brilliant. Then I can work with that. That I can work with. But if you want me to get you down to 120 pounds, I'm not going to try and help you to do that because you're going to fail, in my opinion. I think you're going to fail unless you
Mm,
hurt yourself by, extremes.
right. Yeah. And that can really trigger eating disorders, which is a whole nother conversation in itself.
Oh, yeah, we're
Yeah.
really vulnerable to that. And my doctor actually said that to me. She was like, I want you to be really aware and careful because you're in this high risk category now of addictions and eating disorders.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very interesting place, especially when we're in that, category. We're talking about being alone, right? And especially like now during the holidays, a lot of women have families or families have shifted and changed over COVID, so if you're out there listening and you're feeling alone and you're picking up some foods that you might not feel like is really in tune with your body, maybe go have food with your neighbor or go to your community food hall or wherever there is, join some friends and have some meal and congregate
Congregate.
together. Yeah. And enjoy the food together and learn, maybe experience and express how your body's feeling with your friend.
Yeah. And the sugar reduction really helps with the weight, I think, and
Mm,
also with the symptoms I've noticed. And I think it's, we've got these overcorrections, right?
mm,
Overcorrect. Now you get
right.
a hot flash. Now you're having
Right.
anxiety. It's your body's trying to come back to homeostasis.
Right. It's
And then you
trying.
add blood sugar. So blood sugar, spike, dip, spike, dip.
Too many
It's
ups and
very,
downs.
yeah, it's very hard on the whole system. And there's a great book by a Canadian author, and of course I can't remember her name at the moment, but it's called Becoming Sugar Free. And
Mm,
she has designed these beautiful recipes. The book is gorgeous, and there's some very simple, easy stuff with nice alternatives. And she even lists all the alternative sugars
oh, nice. That's
and
great because that's
how
hard
well
to
they're
find. Mm,
digested and
yeah.
how if they increase your glycemic index, and
Oh,
cause
great.
that spike.
Right.
So you can make more of an informed choice because maybe for you, you love sugar and you love baking and you want to be able to continue to bake. So you can look then at her resources and say, okay, I'm going to choose to use half the sugar and I'm going to use this substitute instead as well
Hmm.
and see what comes out and then be like,
Right.
wow, you know what? This is still really sweet.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
sweet
And can you
enough.
adjust it? Hmm.
So a lot of her
Yeah.
stuff is dessert based, which is, I don't do a lot of dessert in general, but she has one it's a pancake. It's a baked pancake.
Oh.
Her recipe calls for applesauce, and I've been using it with pumpkin because pumpkin is really good for us as an anti-inflammatory. It's really good
Hmm.
for digestion. It's naturally sweet,
Hmm. Filled with
and
beta carotene.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's all the good stuff, and it's delicious. Like my husband actually asks me almost every week if I will make a pan of it because we can make a pan, and
Yeah.
then you just cut it up and you can freeze some, or you can eat
Nice. You
some
have to
right
send us that
away.
recipe so we can
Yeah,
put it into the comments.
it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those there are a lot of creative solutions. But okay, so say you're this average woman, now you've gained some weight, you're feeling really discouraged and maybe having rage and you're having anxiety and now you're supposed to find all these things and try everything. You know what I mean? It's now you're
Right.
completely overwhelmed. That's why
Right.
I'll say to people, like for this woman who wants to work on her body composition, the first thing we'll do is just look at sugar reduction
Right. Yeah. Number
and
one, where is it
we'll see what
coming
she
from?
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what she does with it.
Yeah.
And she'll have to experiment and that will show her willingness. Because that's a hard one, but it's not really hard. But it would be if I was like, okay, and you're also gonna exercise for an hour every day, and you're also gonna join a counseling group, and you're also gonna make your husband do the chores. And like, no, we're gonna focus
One
on the
thing at
one
a
thing.
time. One thing at a time. Yes.
One thing at a time. And that brings me to relationships. So that's the other thing that comes up an awful lot where women are
Hmm.
like, I love my husband. I'm so disoriented though because I want to run away and I want to kick him out, and
Mm,
I'm thinking about divorce, but I know that I still love him, and he's a
mm,
good father and we've had a good relationship, and I don't understand how I feel so foreign. It's so weird for me to
mm,
want to get away from this guy. And what I've learned is that the women that do get divorced under those circumstances, usually on the other side of it go, oh, why did I do that? He was all
mm,
right. He was in
mm,
there trying, and
mm,
now I'm alone,
mm.
because it's really those fluctuations that are
Right. The
contributing.
hormonal fluctuations. Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
can be a challenging one. Relationships are, it can be challenging, right? And so tuning in, and that's when you mentioned earlier, like the counseling component. So that could be another piece that could be brought in during the perimenopause. And well, not just that, but any phase of your life where you're having relationship challenges, is to bring in a counselor that can really talk to you importantly and look at specific issues that can help balance that, whether that's rage, anxiety, depression, and changes in that.
And also bringing your husband in to the
Exactly. Couples
conversation.
counseling.
Yeah,
Yes.
or even just like, for example, I have a master class on intimacy in perimenopause and menopause. And so it's pre-recorded. And what I recommend is that the woman watch it herself
Mm-hmm.
and then invite her spouse in to watch it with her,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
then she doesn't have to, if she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to have that awkward conversation about lubrication,
Right.
because it's in there.
Yeah, right. It's already in the video.
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah.
video, and they can have a conversation about it if they're open. But I think we've learned a lot of body shame for ourselves and maybe
Mm.
don't let him into that aspect. But like, one of my clients had a period that was 3 weeks of the month.
Mm. Oh gosh, that is not in alignment with your body. No.
No. And then goes to the doctor and they're like, oh, none of the treatment options were appealing to her. And so, you know what I mean? Like, where does
Mm.
that leave this lady? And she has to navigate now her marriage as well, and she doesn't want to talk about what's going on.
Right. Mm.
And that's in the class as well, right? What it is. And
Mm.
I don't know about you, but I put in a drawing of the female reproductive
Right.
system with
So
everything
important.
properly labeled.
Right. So you can figure
Right.
out what things are.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
I could, kind of talk them through a little bit about where everything is and what could
Right.
change and what you might look for, and what kind of options there are for treatment. And my biggest advice about vaginal health, which is another huge complaint and does impact our relationships, is think of it like dry eyes.
Mm.
If you start to have dry eyes and you leave it, what happens?
They
Gets
become
worse and
drier.
worse and worse and worse and worse. But if you start to have dry eyes, and then like with swimming, noticing when you come out of the swimming pool, your eyes are dry and you naturally use some natural tears.
Right.
Now you don't develop dry eye. And the same thing with the vaginal health. If you can treat the vagina before you have atrophy and before you
Right.
have terrible
Exactly.
dryness and
Yes.
before you have painful intercourse, then you avoid all those problems.
Mm.
And that has a huge impact on the quality of life. That's one of the ones that really gets to me, that doctors will be like, well, vaginal dryness is just part of it, and if you don't want to do, or you can't do
Just don't have
HRT,
sex anymore.
yeah, just don't have sex anymore. And women are divorcing over that, even though
Right.
they do love their partner. And it's just really sad. I was just talking to a client this morning about that, because she's not a candidate for HRT. And so she was talking about vaginal rejuvenation as a possibility. And
Mm.
she actually talked to her naturopath and got a recommendation for a particular, it's non-hormones, but it's a really good lubrication that she can start using. It. She's going to start going to a pelvic floor physio.
Oh, nice.
And then, so I was able to say to her, a healthy vagina is stretchy and squishy.
That's right. It shouldn't be like stiff and
Yeah.
non-mobile.
Yeah. Cause that's,
Yes.
that causes the UTIs, right?
Right.
And
Yeah. And all kinds of things downstream for
yeah,
sure. Mhm.
incontinence and all that. And
Mm.
so I'm hopeful for her, because when we first started talking about it about a year ago, she was really kind of that mindset. Like,
Mhm.
it's good enough that I didn't die of cancer,
Mm.
right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
alive. So I
Right.
should be grateful for that. And I'm still married, and my husband's very understanding. But I really care about her and all of my clients, and life is for the living, right?
Mm. Yes, totally. Yeah. Being
Let's enjoy
grateful.
ourselves.
Hmm. Right.
Let's have a good
Yes.
time.
We were put on this planet to enjoy life. Yes. And I think that's
Yeah.
a great end of our conversation today. I think we could talk for a really long time, Jessica.
Yeah.
There's so much we could talk about in helping women with perimenopausal symptoms and into menopause. But before we wrap up today, I'd love for you to share some things about how we can find you, how the listeners can tell us about your symposium that you have coming up.
Oh yeah, the symposium. I'm really looking forward to it. So running this group, I saw here are the top 5 concerns, right? The things that
Right.
people are always talking about. And you know, not everybody can afford to work with me as a coach. And the ladies that are having financial issues, I really feel for them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in that same boat. If I wasn't married to a man who's a provider and has a good healthcare insurance plan, I don't know. As I said, I'd be alive, but I'd be sick all the time because I'd be on all of those pills.
Mm-hmm.
So I designed something and I kept it at a really low entry point of $25, thinking, $25 is a nice lunch with your friend. It's enough money to spend that you're probably going to show up,
Right.
but it's not enough to keep you out if you really want this information. And so we start off with the nurse practitioner. So they're kind of in between a nurse and a doctor, and she can prescribe hormones and answer those questions about why we can get certain things and can't get other things and what we actually can get in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're educating ourselves online, we're seeing UK and US information, and it doesn't always translate.
Right.
So that's Monday. So maybe you're really interested in that. So you come on Monday. And then Tuesday, we have a nutritionist talking particularly about foods, what kind of
Mm.
foods can help you with your hormones and how
Mm-hmm.
to eat to regulate your hormones, which is
Nice.
really exciting. I
Yes.
think that would be great. So maybe you want to come to that, but maybe you're not interested in changing your diet. You've done enough of that. You're not interested anymore. So maybe you would come to Wednesday, because on Wednesday we have an acupuncturist, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, who can talk to you about what she would do to help you in her office and
Mm-hmm.
how this helps to support your hormones. Because I myself had that experience with acupuncture where when I was having somewhat regular cycles,
Mm-hmm.
I could time my sessions with her and it would help the cycle to be milder, less pain, you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
less just discomfort and all the rest of that. I've got my kitty friend. And so maybe you want that because you're not interested in prescriptions and you don't want to change your diet. You just come to Wednesday and listen to that. And
Right.
then on Thursday, I'm presenting all about the holistic side of things and the benefits of that, looking at your condition holistically and easy things that you can do. And I'm looking at case studies because when I'm talking to people on about it just in general, it's interesting. But when I talk about an actual person that I've helped with something in particular, that will give you more information about what might possibly work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then on
Yes.
Friday, we have a question and answer or a party. So anything that didn't get answered, anything that you had any burning question. And I'm inviting everybody to email me questions in advance as well,
Oh, nice. Great.
because then I can send them to the expert and say, could you make
Right.
sure to address this in your
Yeah.
presentation? But if there's anything that gets missed, I will answer the questions on Friday. And if I can't answer, I can forward those questions to the experts and then leave it up to them to contact that female person directly, which is like, it's a lot of bang for your buck for $25, but it's designed that way because not everybody's going to want to do all of it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And they might come back and do it later, right? Be
Yeah.
resonant
Yeah.
because they can do their recordings and that way there's something that might not have resonated with them in the moment, but they can check it out later. So tell us how they can sign up.
Well, I have a link to a Stripe payment. So you pay for your ticket and then I get a little email and then I send you all the information to
Perfect.
log in on Zoom. And once the symposium is over, all of the replays will be available. So you can still participate. You can still come in and watch the replays and all the
Nice.
information will still be very good. And then you can contact me if you have any questions because I get a lot of people just, they're like, oh, sorry, I'm sending you a message, but I had a question. It's like, no, you're not bothering me. I actually I have that passion and that drive to help women. And I don't want you to be wondering and suffering and questioning alone. Don't do
Mm,
that. Ask me. And if I don't have the time, I won't get back to you right away. That's
that's
just
right.
as simple
Yes,
as that.
exactly. Yes. And tell us your website and how people can find you on social media, a couple of places they can find you there.
Yeah, so the website is at CanadianPerimenopause.com and we're still building it. So if you get in there and something's awkward or weird, just please forgive us. But I didn't want to build it myself. But but I found a volunteer who's helping me, and she's a programmer. So
Oh, great.
she's very passionate about the cause of helping women and making sure that they're not feeling alone. And it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be based on, we're going to have a nice symptom search and all of that, so you can find information based on what you're living right now.
Nice.
And
Perfect.
yeah, so it's in the process of being built. It's starting to look pretty good, which is really exciting.
Great.
And then the group is Canadian Perimenopause Menopause Support, CPMS, on
Great.
Facebook. So you can apply to get in there. And, you know, it is for Canadians. So if you're American, it's not don't ask to join, but when you request to join, tell me what it is about that group that you want to, you know what I mean? Like, do you have ties to Canada, or, you know, are you okay with the fact that I might say, oh, you should get, you know, like, let's just say Lion's Mane. I can just get that easy tootle on down to the health store. I'm not sure in your
Right.
county if you can do that, right?
Right.
You might
Hmm.
not be able to. So that could be
Right.
frustrating. And as long as
Yeah.
you're okay with that, that it's Canadian based information,
Hmm.
then, and you're actually a woman, although we do have couples, sometimes couple profiles will join. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. We'll put all of those links in the show notes for everyone to join in and check it out. And of course, the symposium link, we'll have that there too. And thank you so much for joining me today, Jessica. I loved our conversation and I can't wait to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, me too. I'm super wonderful, grateful to meet you today. And I hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving and, you know, can drop some of those expectations and enjoy
Mm.
themselves as well,
Right.
especially if they're hosting. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yes. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for you tuning in and listening today to the Genetic Genius podcast.